Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to get talking about a recent video posted by Let's Ask Shogo. If you're not familiar with Let's Ask Shogo, Shogo runs a channel and the focus of it is like Japanese culture primarily, and he does talk a little bit about Budo. Well, he talks a fair amount actually about Budo, in particular Iaido. Since that is the main art that he practices. And I know he practices Koryu as well, like a sort of separate Koryu school. He's also strongly affiliated, involved with another channel called Let's Ask Sensei, which is pretty cool channel. It features Hachidan Iaido teacher, Seki Sensei, who also he's the 22nd headmaster of his Koryu school. And yeah, pretty cool channels. You know, I like what they do, I like the work generally. But recently, Shogo posted on his own channel, Let's Ask Shogo. It was a video he posted where he's got this thumbnail, you know, of him doing a bow, like really super overly apologetic bow, which I found, I got to be honest, just a little too much, a little too cringy. Just saying, you know, like that he's a liar. But one of the topics that he talked about, basically the video was about some things that he's, I guess, said in past videos where since then he's come to form a different opinion. And as he's expressed those opinions on his journey, I guess people have maybe called him out in the comments saying, but you said this before and you said that before. So I guess the video is kind of to straighten up some of those points, I guess. You know, everyone's on a journey and your outlook and your opinion can change. I certainly don't have a problem with that. Anyway, one of the things he talked about was this idea in Budo, whether it be Kendo or Iaido or Judo or, you know, whatever the case is, this sort of concept of, or this ideal that practicing the art can make you a better person. Now, I'm paraphrasing on purpose because these are the terms that Shogo was using. And his point was that in more recent times, he's come to find that practicing Budo does not make you a better person. And on the face of that, when you simplify it down to that dumbest degree, yeah, I would agree with that, 100%, yeah. But look, behind me here, I've got the purpose of Kendo. This camera kind of flips it around. So I'll turn around and read that to you. So it says, the purpose of Kendo, to mold the mind and body, to cultivate a vigorous spirit, and through correct and rigid training, strive for the improvement in the art of Kendo, to hold in esteem human courtesy and honor, to associate with others with sincerity, and to forever pursue the cultivation of one's self. Thus will one be able to love one's country and society, contribute to the development of culture, and promote peace and prosperity among all peoples. I've talked about these before on my channel. Yeah, it's fairly lofty goals. But here's the thing, here's my take on this. Ramsey Dewey, by the way, shout out to Ramsey Dewey. He runs a YouTube channel. He's one of the best martial arts coach YouTubers on the platform, in my opinion. And if you are not familiar with his channel, you should definitely check it out. If you're into martial arts, definitely worth a look. He's an MMA coach based in Shanghai, China. American chap. But he has quite a strong background in so-called traditional martial arts. Why I say so-called is because most of them are, they're perceived as classical martial arts, but they're actually fairly modern martial arts. And he's one of those people who will always make that distinction. But anyhow, he coaches MMA. He has background in jiu-jitsu as well. I believe kickboxing, taekwondo, I believe is where he started. So, you know, he's been around the block and tried many different martial arts, including things like Tai Chi Chuan. And he's been able to practice with some very genuine people in China rather than the sort of I guess, more commercial face of Tai Chi. So yeah, he talks about this, and it's definitely worth having a look at his channel, because I think he does some really fantastic discussions on this topic. But does doing martial arts make you a better person? Just out of the box, I turn up and train, therefore I am? Certainly not. Definitely not. And to that point, I would agree with Shogo on this. However, I do think that there is an oversimplification, right? So just to go back to the words, it says to mold the mind and body, to cultivate a vigorous spirit, and through correct and rigid training, strive for improvement in the art of Kendo. And then it goes into the other aspects about courtesy and honor and sincerity and so on. So the devil is in the detail. By simply turning up and training, and in the case of Kendo, getting better at hitting people with sticks, or if you really dumb it down, is an empty practice, right? It's an empty practice of the modern art of Kendo, or similarly worded purpose for Iaido, right? If you just turn up and you swing swords, and in your mind you're just there to imagine how you might kill people with said sword, this is then an empty practice of the art of Iaido. And the same goes for Judo. I'm just there to throw people around and learn how to hurt them by throwing them on the ground. This then becomes an empty practice of the modern art of Judo. Very set apart from Kenjutsu, which is the techniques of killing with the Japanese sword. Very different from Jujutsu, which is the hand-to-hand combat, traditional Japanese hand-to-hand combat, right? So these are modern arts, and they've been repurposed. There's many reasons for that. For example, the end of World War II, the American occupation forces, in Japan, it was seen as, if we allow people to practice fighting, martial skills, are we kind of like feeding the beast here? Teaching more people how to fight, so that they can rise up in rebellion, or so there was this caution, obviously, from the Allied powers about allowing martial practice to continue. So the Japanese obviously wanted to preserve the cultural aspects of these things, but not with the intention of going to war again. And a good way to do that was through the Olympics and through education systems. So Judo obviously led the way with that, because it was purposed with the Olympic Games in mind, right? And it was the first one to establish the Dan-rank system, which then all the other arts started to kind of go, okay, well, that's working quite well for them, we'll kind of piggyback off of that. But really, showing up and training every day is only part of it. Yes, there's a discipline in that, in turning up and being there and doing the actual physical practice. Sure, there's a discipline in that, but it's a very rudimentary and basic discipline. If you want to make yourself a better person through the practice of martial arts, then first off, you have to figure out, what do you think a better person is? What do you think makes a better person, right? And it turns out that our elders have considered this question, as they, the people who formed, in our case, the All Japan Kendo Federation, which governs Kendo and Iaido in this case. And they start talking about things like courtesy, honor, the sincerity, these kinds of things that are mentioned in the wording of the purpose. These things are there to get you to think about, to reflect on. No one's going to hand it to you on a platter. It's the same thing as your training. You're not just going to get better because your teacher said, here, this is how you do it. You have to study it. You have to attempt it, try it, fail at it, consider why you failed and how you failed, and develop your own plans to tackle trying to improve. And this goes for your technique, along with how you interact with people. Jordan Peterson, well-known, renowned psychologist, despite what some elements of the media might have you think, and regardless of whatever your personal opinion of him may be, if you're aware of him, makes a very good point, which is, and he talks about raising children and the place of parents in, the role that parents play in facilitating safe play, which is crucial for the development of young minds, which is essentially that you put up a wall around the children so that they can play safely within those walls. What does that mean? You establish certain limits. So, the two boys are wrestling, and it's like, no, you can't gouge him in the eyes, because if he loses an eye, it won't grow back, right? So there's a limit that you've imposed on it. But otherwise, they start to express themselves, and they start to find their limits within a certain set of parameters that you can't go beyond. Similarly, if they're wrestling with their dad, right, and they go a step too far, if the dad can't handle it pain threshold-wise, there's pushback to that, so that the child understands that you can't play in the playground with other people's kids like this. And similarly, when you grow up, you can't behave like this. There is a line, there are borders. You have freedom of expression to a certain degree. Once it infringes upon other people, then this becomes a problem. The dojo does something very similar, right? So you come to practice martial arts. Let's take the example of an MMA club, because in Kendo we wear armor and we're well protected, and this sort of thing happens, but it's somewhat negated simply by the use of the armor. But in hand-to-hand combat, you can wear head guards and things like that to protect from crucial injuries, but there's a lot of parts of you that are just unarmored. So it's people hitting people. If you go in there and you spar too hard, right, and you're just knocking people about and hurting them and looking to basically beat people up and just show them who's boss and who's better, even if you are the better fighter, no one's going to want to spar with you anymore, right? No one's going to turn up for training. And, so what's the point here? Is, well, if you behave like a bit of a jackass, then all your options are going to go away. You can't do it alone. You can't be the elite level on your own. You need help. You need people around you. You need facilities. You need training partners. You need coaches. And, if you get on without sincerity, without courtesy, without respect for other people and the place that you're practicing and all these things, then those things aren't going to be there for you. And then you won't have the tools that you need to reach the pinnacle, right? So even if you're selfish and you come into this with just your own progression in mind, these are the stumbling blocks that you're going to run into and you're going to have to reflect on. And this is the journey of Budo, right? Especially if you stick at it, because the higher you go, the harder it gets. To get done ranks, to get, have success in the Shiai, the competition, whatever the case is, sooner or later you're going to run into failures. You're going to hit walls that push back. And in order to get past those, you're going to need the assistance of other people who are better than you, or more experienced than you, or they're better coaches. Maybe they can just get to the heart of the matter. And there's an old expression that I remember when I first started Kendo, which was, show a willingness to learn. That's what all the, arriving to the dojo early, cleaning the floor, carrying the sensei's armor for him and setting it up and these things. It's like a nice gesture. It's not, we're bowing in reverence because you're some sort of deity-like character. That's not it. It's a nice gesture to show the teacher, I'm on the ball, the place is clean, we're ready to rock, I'll help you get set up because I'm eager to get going, because I know your time's valuable and I want to learn as much from you as I can while you're here. That kind of attitude. And that catches high grades' attention. Are there high grades that maybe abuse that? Maybe. I've not met any personally, but I can see how that would be possible. And I know that Shogo touched briefly upon the problem with sort of pay for grades type thing that was going on in Iaido a few years back. You know, and there's a sort of culture of gift giving and stuff like that, which is a real thing. I mean, gift giving is a real thing. It's central in Japan, but you know, that sort of thing being abused in the name of, as I say, grades and prestige and that sort of thing. And that is a problem. It is a genuine problem. But I don't think that, you know, it's such a small percentage, especially when you're talking right at the top there, when you're talking about the level of Hachidan, the 8th Dan, the highest level. The failure rate is so high for it anyway. You know, the pass rate is so slim. And so if you're talking about a small percentage of that tiny percentage of passes, for example, in Kendo, the pass rate is something like anywhere between, like, say, 0.6 and maybe a maximum of like 1.5% or something like that annually, you know. And maybe you're talking about, at best, say 10% of those maybe would be have like some sort of like bad connotation or corruption attached to it. I'm not saying in Kendo, I've never heard of it related to Kendo, but I have, you know, heard about it related to Iaido. So you're talking about the tiniest percentage of the tiniest percentage. The bulk of people practicing it who choose to go beyond their school years or do it in their adult years and actually keep up with it, they're trying to do it with the honesty, the courtesy, the sincerity. And if you're sticking to it and you're doing it regularly, and especially if that's not a basic part of your culture, maybe it's easy to take it for granted if you're Japanese and you've been raised with, I suppose, a more traditional Japanese household in terms of values. I don't mean in terms of like how you get on, like I'm not saying you dress in a kimono every day and that sort of thing. But what I'm saying is maybe your parents are, you know, manners first and etiquette and this kind of thing and the formalities, and that stuff is, you know, from what I understand, is still very prevalent in Japan. So maybe you take that for granted because that's just the way you grew up. But in the West, it's not really like that. These things have to be taught. I'm not saying we're complete hellions and we're without courtesy and respect and all these things. But we tend to learn those lessons much later in life properly, to like a deep level properly. And even then, we can still be quite abrasive. You know, we say what we think and we have less of a filter, you know. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. But for people who want to have a bit of a slice of the old world, so to speak, by practicing a Budo, I think that's why they go for it, you know. So, and it's not to say that an MMA club or a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club wouldn't have some of the same tenets. At the end of the day, some of this is just basic respect, basic courtesy, basic, you know, humility. If you want to improve, you have to be humble enough to understand that you're not very good, you know, that kind of thing. You need to be courteous. You need to be, you know, all these things towards other people so that you can work with them and they'll want to work with you and spend the time with you. And by putting yourself in that system every, say it's 2-3 times a week, whatever, how many times you train, that sort of regularity, right? And the higher you go, the more you start to reflect upon these things, these principles. And as a coach, and somebody who's trying to go for now the 5th Dan in Kendo, and I'll be going then for 2nd Dan in Iai soon, I've had plenty of time to reflect on these things, and believe me, I do reflect on them, particularly since I became a father. You know, I'm often questioning myself, could I have conducted myself better? What kind of example am I setting for my children? I've got 2 boys that I'm raising as well. There's a certain kind of man I would like to see them grow into. It doesn't mean they have to agree with me on everything, but there's a certain way I would like, a certain amount of respect I'd like them to treat other people with, you know. So, yeah, I wouldn't underestimate the value that the martial arts can bring. However, it's not a case that you turn up and it's like a Coke machine, you know, you just put your coin in and push the button and it spits out better character and better virtues. Of course not. But what you can do is if you come to it with an open book, an empty cup, and you're willing to fill it up with things, and like I said, you go there, you receive the lessons, and you reflect, and you make a conscious effort to try to develop yourself, then in that sense, I believe the martial arts can help a lot of people when it comes to becoming a better person. And that can mean many different things for many people. Maybe you were already good at fighting, you got into fights a lot as a kid. Maybe that needs tempered, yeah? Maybe that needs channeled into something productive rather than destructive. Maybe you were the person who got bullied and you were always quiet and withdrawn, and you go to martial arts and you're more confident, you're more aware of your surroundings, you find yourself in less dangerous situations less often because you learn to spot the heat around the corner. I've heard that one from many martial artists a lot of the time, their situational awareness, just because they've practiced martial arts for a long amount of time, not because they're a good fighter, but just because they've put themselves into a martial culture. They become better equipped to be situationally aware when they're out and about, and so they stay out of trouble. They're also less likely to be mouthy because they treat people with courtesy and respect and these sorts of things, and they hold those values they hold those values dear. They sort of champion those values. So the way they tend to get on, say in the context of being in a pub and there's some drunken person that's maybe getting a bit out of hand, and rather than get out of hand with them, instead they've become adept at talking reasonably and simmering things down, or being able to close the conversation and politely walk away, or whatever it is. As I said, you could get the sense of confidence and find a voice for yourself, and maybe this sort of thing carries over into the workplace. And you find yourself becoming the person that before maybe you would have quietly just worked away at your job, never got promoted, or that sort of thing, just being kept in your place but done perfectly okay. But then you get this sort of sense of confidence, and you start to see strategies on how you can make your way forward, right? And make an impression on people, make a name for yourself, find ways to give your name value to other people. Just the same way you do in the dojo, right? If you're a good training partner, people remember you and they want to train with you. It's the same thing for the teachers, the sensei. They start to remember, like, I've seen that person here a couple of times. They're always here early. And they stay late to make sure the place is clean and tidy and that sort of stuff. Teachers have loads of time for people like that. You find yourself sitting in the pub with them, and you're talking to the highest grade in the room, just having a normal conversation where you pick up all kinds of things, just because they thought you are good character, right? It's one of those things, right, where they are people who turn up and just kind of autopilot their way through, and you don't stand out for the right reasons, and maybe sometimes you don't stand out at all. You don't want to stand out for the wrong reasons, of course, like being the person who's always late without a good reason, or always misses training, or when you come to training you interrupt sensei all the time, or whatever it is, right? Those are bad things. Don't do those. But yeah, so back to the point of what Shogo was saying, I think he's still maybe going through some reflection on this, but I don't think he was lying the first time. I just don't think he'd fully considered how well thought out these things are. They didn't come up with the purpose of Kendo or the purpose of the Iaido on a whim. And it's not about being virtuous in the sense that we understand in the West of, I need to show people that I'm a good person. But actually you don't really, I'm all about climate change, or I'm all about a clean environment. But yet in practice, maybe you're the person dropping the litter on the ground, or, you've got the lights on at home all the time, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's not about looking virtuous. It's about actually reflecting and trying to actually apply, which is the same thing you need to do in your training. It shouldn't be that you just turn up and sensei says things and you nod and you go, "Hi sensei," and then you just forget about them. You need to go away and reflect on those things. You need to actively practice them in the dojo. You need to actively practice them in your kendo. You need to, get feedback and go away, consider it, come back and apply, and do that in a cycle and continuously chip away at it. And it's never done. And that's the same thing with how you conduct yourself. And in that sense, I think Budo in particular can be a very, very strong ally, shall we say. It's not going to make you into what you want to be, but it is going to give you the walls within that you can practice honing yourself into the person you want to be. It may take a little longer for it to reflect outside of the walls of the dojo, but think of the dojo as the safe play box where you can mess it up a bit, not get it right the first time. And then when you go into the real world, hopefully you're operating in the right parameters and you add value to your name. And in that sense, I do think martial arts can make you a better person. But you've got to want to go there. And that's the bottom line. Right, that's where I'm going to leave it, guys. If you want to check out Shogo's original video, I will link, there's two actually, but I'll link the most recent one that I was referring to in the video. I'll link that in the description. So head on down there and check it out. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.